thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
We were saying just off air before that I feel like I know you because I see you so much on LinkedIn and we've run in the same kind of circles, but I don't think we've ever met in person.
No, I don't think so. It's lovely to meet you.
You too. The other reason, maybe this shouldn't go on the recording, but I'm going to say it anyway. The other reason why I feel like I know you is my wife is called Rachel and my brother's called Lewis. So
Oh,
Rachel
that's
Lewis
good. That's weird.
always resonates with me as a name. But yeah.
See, I have this recurring thing at the moment. Again, shouldn't be on the podcast, but I keep being mistaken for other people.
Okay.
And the other day, it was so much that somebody ran up, held on to me, and took a selfie with me before running off and shouting, "I loved you on the TV this morning."
Wow.
So it
Who
happens
did they
all the
think you
time.
were?
Don't know.
No.
Just I don't know what it is.
That's okay if they're mistaking you for someone like, an A-list celebrity or something. That's okay.
Well, the one that I had recently, the celebrity was Maureen Lipman.
Oh, you don't want to be. No, that's not the greatest. But yeah. Oh well.
Anyway,
Let's
we
actually
digress.
start. Yeah. So for the audience, for those who don't know who Dr. Rachel Lewis is, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah. So I'm Rachel Lewis. I'm an occupational psychologist.
Mm-hmm.
I am the managing partner of Affinity Health at Work with Joe Yarker, and Affinity is a research consultancy that specialises in evidence-based wellbeing and mental health at work.
Yeah.
And I'm also an academic at Birkbeck, so I'm a reader at Birkbeck in workplace health.
Amazing. And the reason the way I remember you, Rachel, is you're the person who does workplace wellbeing properly. So we've got the rest of us consultants like trying our best. I mean, I'm not an occupational psychologist. I'm not chartered. I'm a business psychologist.
Nice.
And I try to take an evidence-based approach, but I always feel like you're the gold standard, right? And I love the research that you put out. I often use it as a, reference it with clients that we're working with or in the community as well, because the work that you produce is at such a high standard. I love it.
Oh, thank you. Gives you a big step up if you've been working in academia, because I think one of the issues we've tried to address in Affinity is that if you're not in academia, having access to all the latest research and also being able to read academic papers and get the nugget of information from it is really tricky. So we have a kind of step up there.
Yeah. Do you know what I feel might be a game changer here? And you might completely disagree with this, but AI, I don't mind reading journal articles because I'm sad like that. I'm a bit of a geek, but even me, when I'm reading these, I quite like, ChatGPT can help me to decipher them. Put this in plain English. Tell me what the 3 things are that I need to know from this study. Now, you do miss some of the nuance there, that there's, as you and I know, there's interesting, null hypotheses could be just as interesting as a really fascinating finding, but as a quick way of deciphering quite complex information, I think it could be quite useful.
Yeah, I think it's brilliant. And we use it a lot as the kind of basis of a story as well, and then bringing the evidence around it. I think one of the things that it's not quite there yet with is doing the reviews, is finding the evidence, because the evidence it doesn't find it from the places that we'd like to, and doesn't necessarily have the same criteria that we would use. But yeah, once you've found the paper, then getting it summarized by ChatGPT, brilliant.
Yeah. So I can keep doing it because you said it's all right. So I can.
Yeah. And we do it. We absolutely do it. It saves time, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So you're at the Health and Wellbeing conference, a work conference. So what are you speaking on? What's the?
Tomorrow I'm speaking about our maturity assessment that we've developed. Mm-hmm. So it's a new framework to kind of help people and simplify the process of developing an evidence-based wellbeing program and system and strategy within your organization.
Okay. And what does it look like? Is it a tool that you use, or is it a process or methodology?
Wow, that's a really good question. So essentially the framework itself has 5 pillars. Mm-hmm. So I guess a descriptive matrix, and each of those 5 pillars, which are elements of things that you need to have in place to secure a healthy working environment or healthy well-being management system. And then each of these pillars have different things underneath them. So at its simplest level, it is just a framework by which organizations could assess what they have in place in terms of their organization. However, I think the thing that's different is that, well, there's quite a few things that are different. Firstly, that it has 4 levels in each of those different elements, which means that I guess going back, the reason why we did it is that there are loads and loads of wellbeing frameworks out there. So we have things like guidance such as the ISO 45003 standard or the WHO mental health at work standard. We have frameworks such as the mental health at work commitment, which is about kind of public commitment. There are so many also sector level frameworks. There are also so many awards like the CIPD awards or Mad World awards or This Can Happen awards and so on. And those frameworks, awards, pledges, commitments massively differ in terms of, firstly, what they're seeing as mental health and well-being. Secondly, the scope of what they actually measure. Thirdly, their evidence base. And fourthly, the level of achievement, the level of maturity. And so what happens then is organizations don't get a consistent way of understanding what they should use or how they should use it. And therefore things don't happen properly. Or so what we did with this is we essentially, it's meant to be a meta framework. So we meta synthesized a huge amount of data down to see what they all had in common and what the research literature has in common to say, these are the things. And then within each, this is the level of maturity. So number 1 is if you're just starting out, what should you do? Right through to level 4 being if you're wanting to go for ISO 45003 and you're the most mature organization, this is what you should do.
No.
So, but your question about is it a methodology is, in reality, I don't think organizations at the moment, the way we haven't built it at the moment where they could use it easily themselves. It probably takes someone like us to analyze the amount of data to ascertain where people are.
Yeah. Okay. It's really interesting.
Sorry, really long answer.
No. Good answer though. No, I know, and I'm interested in the detail as well. So what do the pillars look like then? So
So the first pillar is design good jobs. So that pillar is exactly what you'd expect to see in something like the management standards.
Mm-hmm.
So looking at what we need is avoiding psychosocial risks. It's a bit extended from the psychosocial hazards because from the management standards, because one of the things we found was that the management standards doesn't necessarily take into account the changes in the nature of work that have happened over the last 20 years, global trends such as demography, but also the way of which we're working. So think of that. The second one is about all about the level of openness in the organization to mental health and well-being. So how much are people able to talk about it? How much is well-being part of your vernacular in your organization? But also whether senior leaders talk about it, whether there's external advocacy, whether your organization's going for awards in this area of things. The third one is what you have in place in terms of tools, programs. So that's where we're mapping into the primary, secondary, tertiary health promotion. So do you have things to prevent people getting sick at work? Do you have things in place to support them to stay in a potentially unhealthy environment? Do you have things in place to support people when they are ill? And do you have things that are generally helping people to be healthy? So they're the first 3. So the first 3 might be covered by broadly by a framework such as the mental health at work commitment, which is much more looking at an environment and including psychosocial risk. Then the 4th and the 5th pillar. So the 4th one is about the level of governance that you have around your mental health and well-being. So is there a named person? How is it cascaded through the organization? Do you feed into champions in the C-suite, for instance? And the 4th one and the 5th one being then about the level of data you collect. So how do you collect data on mental health and well-being? What do you do with that data? Do you have an improved kind of process? So that the fourth and fifth ones are ones that would typically be within something like the ISO standards, but not within other standards.
Got you.
But what we know is that for actually things to work, you need all of those.
And I love that data's been given its own pillar.
Yeah.
That's what you see. So
Yeah.
those ones as well possibly work across some of the other pillars as well, because you're going to need data. For example, you talked about health promotion, or to evaluate the effectiveness of that over time and prove ROI and all this sort of thing.
Yeah.
So,
But it's amazing how many organisations don't collect data, or collect data but never use it in that planful way as part of a health program. So they might gather it in terms of how many people have attended, but not think, what are we actually trying to achieve from this?
absolutely. I've seen that same sort of trend. It's baffling, that, isn't it?
Yeah.
That we've been talking about this for so long. What do you think the barrier is? Why do you think that these organisations don't necessarily use that data or collect that data in a meaningful way?
I think sometimes it's time. I think secondly time both because people are time poor, and everybody seems to be time poor and challenged. I think secondly time also because sometimes that the time at which you would realise effects of this are quite long. I think secondly it can be quite tricky to do because I think there's some of the things that you expect to be that organisations might expect to see as a difference and not differences. We see a lot of data looking at training equivalents, don't we, where training doesn't have the effect on what we expect, but it does have other effects. So, for instance, looking at, mental health first aid doesn't change the dial in terms of mental health, but what it does do is reduce stigma about mental health. So it's those things about sometimes people are not evaluating the right things, maybe don't. I think the third and probably the most cynical response is that sometimes these things are not done with the aim of it creating a healthy working environment. They're done with the need to reach compliance or the need that to be a tick box, perhaps.
And another one I'd add to that, which is another cynical view, because I'm good at cynicism, is that if we had data about it, then we might actually have to do something about it. So maybe there's a fear aspect to it as well, that we can pretend what we're doing is working because we can't prove otherwise. We can't prove if it's not or if it is.
And I think that fear thing's always also feeds back to that lack of time, isn't it? We often see that reticence to do diagnostics is not because they don't want to know, it's because they don't have the time or the resource to do something about what they find.
Got you.
And so it's better not to do the diagnostic and just carry on, because once you've uncovered it, then you'll raise people's expectations and you'll get more, essentially a greater downlift just by the activity.
Yeah. Super interesting topic. We could probably speak for hours about that alone, but you're doing a talk about it. So if people want to know more, they can see the talk. Another piece of work that I believe you're working on, and I'm not going to be able to articulate this correctly because I don't know what it's called, but is it a standard for wellbeing leadership? I saw you were collecting some information about that. I'm particularly I'll tell you why I'm particularly interested in it, because obviously we host the Working Well community, which is about wellbeing leaders, across all sorts of different industries and organizations. And one of the things, our mission is almost to enhance and legitimize that role, for a number of different reasons. So it reduces imposter syndrome, so that people actually feel like, can be sure I'm doing what I'm meant to be doing. But I feel like a clear standard could really help with that. So I was really interested by the work that you do. Could you tell us a bit more about it?
Yeah, we need to join together on this.
We do.
Let me speak to you after this on this. Yes, essentially, really similar to you, we feel there needs to be a standard. I think one of the things is that when we're talking to organisations, we sometimes talk to HR, we sometimes talk to health and safety, we sometimes talk to occupational health, and often the wellbeing professionals also don't have a feed into the classical decision-making structures that you would expect. And that differentiation and lack of senior management's commitment also, or not commitment, visibility, means that I don't think that wellbeing necessarily has the impact that it should do. So then we have the different stakeholders that kind of own or seen to own well-being.
Yeah.
So you have the institutions like CIPD or SOM or the HSE. You also then have a lived experience community, and then lots of other ones that come from management, that come from psychotherapy or so on and so on. And each of them have different views about what a wellbeing professional means or a wellbeing leader is. And what that means is that because there's no standard and everyone has their different views, then there's not a consistent narrative that anyone can have about this is firstly what we need to have in terms of professionals in wellbeing in organisations, but secondly stops people having really planned or obvious career routes to how to become a wellbeing leader. So I'm sure you'll see in your work that the route to a wellbeing leader is massively diverse. But for us to be able to do wellbeing right in organisations, we need to make sure people have the right skills and the right professional journey to get there, or be able to know within their team they have that.
Yeah.
So what we're doing is we're bringing together all the institutions and lived experience communities to essentially get a framework that includes and holds all the different perspectives. So the idea being that this would be an overall framework that has progression in it, so that can say this is what you have for 1 to 3 years experience, 3 to 5 and so on.
Yeah.
But also enables those institutions that want to still have some ownership to still have ownership. So for instance, we know that the people who are from occupational health will have certain skills that we can't expect necessarily those that come from an HR background to have.
Yeah.
But what we want is for those two to know what those different skills is.
Yes.
And if they want to then go to occupational health and build those skills in that particular thing, great. Or if the occupational health community want to go and build health and safety skills, great.
Yeah.
But we need to know what they are to bring us together and have a common narrative to build our voice as wellbeing professionals.
I absolutely love this. I love this. Yeah. There's a couple of things going from there. One quick one is I did a post on LinkedIn a couple of weeks ago now, and I was wrestling with it at the time. So I posted it almost as like a stream of consciousness rather than a coherent thought. But it was off the back of a job posted by Stephen Bartlett, Dragon's Den.
Yeah.
Stephen Bartlett. So they were hiring for a head of health and happiness, I think they were called.
Wow.
So head of health and happiness. And when I initially saw that, everything in me was like, that's great. Person in a really influential position, all these followers, millions of followers on LinkedIn, recruiting for a role like that. Then I read the job description and it was interesting. So he basically said, what's important is that you need to be a hard worker, willing to learn and kind. And what's not important is any experience, any qualifications, or there was a third one as well. Essentially, like you don't have to have done this job before. Now, part of my head went to that's great from an inclusivity perspective. You do want to include people. And I'm not one of those ones who feels like you must have a degree to be able to do this job necessarily. But then my mind went straight away to, would they take that same approach if they were hiring for a finance director or an IT director? You know, like they'd surely want some qualifications or proof of experience.
Yeah.
But when it's health and happiness, is it because it's soft and fluffy that we don't need those things? And I in the video, I wasn't necessarily putting this on Stephen Bartlett. I was saying it's a failure of the wellbeing community itself, and the roles that we have, that there's not that clear enough framework or agreed qualifications or agreed experience to draw upon.
Yeah.
So then you'll just maybe default to, we just want someone who's hardworking and kind. And you know what? You might get an amazing person who's hardworking and kind, but when I first saw it, my mind went there. I don't know what you think.
It's that thing about if we don't have a standard, we don't know what we don't know, do we? And I think it's great to get somebody in who has who wants to do a great job and has passion in that area, but they also need to know what works and what the evidence shows, and because otherwise, what's the point? And I guess that the answer to that is that, and it's something that we constantly are trying to fight for at Affinity, is that recognition that we're not talking about well-being as a fluffy thing. We're talking about well-being to make you more productive at work as well.
Yeah.
We're talking about well-being actually feeding into your bottom line and contributing to this.
Yeah.
And and being imperative for realizing your bottom line. And I think if Stephen Bartlett was seeing well-being from that point of view, then exactly as you say, you wouldn't appoint with that, in the same way as you wouldn't appoint your finance director to have no needs or no expectations.
Yeah. Even as I was recording the message, I felt harsh recording it because I thought, I've given the benefit of the doubt. He's, the fact that his organization is hiring for a head of health and happiness, great. That's great because, it's not that many years ago or even now there's lots of organizations who don't have anyone in that sort of position. But then, it was interesting. This whole piece around the standard came up.
Yeah.
And in the comments, a few people mentioned your work, referenced your work.
Oh,
I said,
good.
well, it's coming.
Lovely.
It's coming. So
exciting. Yeah.
the other thing that I wanted to run by you is, so we did a similar-ish piece of work, perhaps not to the extent in terms of rigor that you have done within the community, whereby through the podcast, we actually get the opportunity to interview and speak to all these wellbeing leaders from all different organizations. And one thing is about the career paths are always really interesting. That we hear so varied.
Yeah.
But the other thing that we ask them is what do you think it is that makes you great in your role? What attributes do you have that make you a great wellbeing leader? What we did was we took 21 of these episodes from quite high profile wellbeing leaders, distilled that information. Again, ChatGPT did much of the heavy lifting here. And we're able to draw out, we've called them the 9 effective habits, or the 9 habits of effective wellbeing leaders. So these 9 sets of behaviors or habits that they do that came up time and time again, that essentially the idea is that if you can do those things well, you're probably going to be quite effective in your role. So we kind of took a more behavioral approach to it, but it'll be interesting to see how that overlaps or feeds into the work that you're doing.
Your work's already come up in our search, so your work is already part of our evidence review, so it will be in there.
There you go. There you go. And what did you think? Disagreed with it all? Disagreed with 8 of the 9?
I think it's great. I think one of the things is what I think the struggle will be with is the balance of specificity rather as well as range.
Yeah.
Because I think sometimes that those good things could be applicable to lots of different types of effective leaders. Yeah. And what we want to create from this is what's specific to wellbeing professionals.
Yes.
What do we have to do differently? So yeah, we're going with the behaviors, but we're also collecting activities as well. So hopefully can marry those two together.
Yes, and that's what it needs, really.
Yeah.
That's why I'm waiting with bated breath for your work to come out, because I see them as totally complementary. Like absolutely, these 9 habits might be really great practice in terms of traits or attributes that people have, but then as you say, in terms of the activities that we're actually doing, what does that look like? What does that look like? So yeah, I'm interested to see where that goes. And I don't know, I guess this is half a statement, half a question, but what you see as the future of well-being. I was having a conversation just before with one of my colleagues. I came to this event, I think 15, 16 years ago, and the world of workplace well-being has changed during that time. It definitely has. But I still feel like maybe we've not reached this tipping point that we were promised 15 years ago. 15 years ago, organizations are finally going to get it and make it onto the top table and they'll be recognized. And I feel like we're still fighting that fight sometimes. Do you feel like we're closer to that point? Do you feel like anything else would change over the next? And how long is that going to take? That's a difficult question.
I think there has been a lot of change. I think that the pandemic was great for the wellbeing profession, certainly for the people within the wellbeing profession, like me and an affinity that talk to the idea of prevention and talk to the idea of job design being key for wellbeing. And so I think that massive experiment we had to look at how we could work differently and still thrive has enabled a change in the conversation. So I think that has pushed some of the narratives forward a lot more than we could have achieved otherwise. I do think that we now have some of the global trends are causing huge challenges to progressing wellbeing forward. So I think things like excessive job demands and working hours and work intensification is meaning that still because wellbeing hadn't before that, reached this kind of non-negotiable stage where it was seen as a non-negotiable in organisation, it's still at that nice to have stage with many. And so it's being knocked out by the increasing challenges that we're seeing within how people are doing their work.
Yeah.
But I do feel really hopeful. It's a world
You're
apart
optimistic
from
still.
it's a world apart from what we were discussing when I came into this 20 years ago. Most of the discussions were, is stress even a thing? And
Is it a thing? No.
yeah, and discussions about, well, the organisation will never be responsible if someone is stressed at work. And I mean, sometimes I hear that, but really rarely now, really rarely. And the level of narrative has massively changed. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm hopeful.
Yeah.
Hopeful.
Good.
I do have moments of existential crisis.
I
where
know.
think I'm
We all do.
backwards,
We all
but,
do.
You know, on the whole, it's moving in the right direction.
Just need to be within communities like this and feel a bit better about.
Yeah. Just spend some time here.
Yeah.
It's like I was going to call it an ice bath, but no, that's the
A
opposite.
tonic. A tonic.
Yes, that's a better way of describing it. Yeah.
Do you do ice baths?
No. Do you?
I've got a thing, I can't bear cold water, so I made myself do the Wim Hof course to make myself kind of experience ice baths, because then I thought cold water would be nice. I have this fantasy of myself as a cold water swimmer.
Yeah.
But it was hideous.
Yeah.
It was hideous.
Yeah, I'm glad you've said that.
Yeah.
So I feel like, strange, this is again a LinkedIn post. I commented on someone's post on LinkedIn just yesterday or the day before about this very subject, because they were on about having ice baths, and they weren't a particular advocate for them, by the way. And I just found it really interesting. There's almost this stigma that you're not allowed to say you don't like ice baths. But my example of that is at the gym that I go to, there's 3 or 4 showers in a row, like communal showers that are outside by the pool. And everybody jumps out of the sauna and has a cold shower. And I just can't stand it. So I'm stood there having a nice, lovely, warm shower as these 3 people are hating life next to me. And I think, my mental health's all right, still. Even though I'm not having a cold shower.
Funny.
I don't need it.
But it does really work for some people. And I think
so, yeah.
I think that's the other thing that we bang on about all the time, but it's the not one thing is going to work for everybody. We need these huge menus of evidence-based type of activities and interventions. But in the same way as we like different foods, we like different types of well-being things. They all work differently for us. So yeah, ice baths don't do it for me, and I'm all right with that now.
Me
But
too.
other things do.
Me too.
Gratitude really works for me.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's nice to hear. Yeah. This is why I was going to say something that works for me, isn't it?
Yeah,
Hanging
go
out
on,
with
go
my
on.
kids, yeah, that was.
Oh,
No,
that's good. That's all right.
It does. I think social connection.
Yeah.
And so, I'm definitely a quality over quantity when it comes to my social connection. I'm not one of these people with huge amounts of friends and family. But, there's a handful of people who, if I just spend an hour with them, and you don't even need to talk to them, you can just sit in the same room with them, and it feels like it recharges me. Just being around these individuals. So,
Yeah.
Yeah. Much like now.
Nice.
I feel like I'm out of time. Yeah, I'm almost out of time, so I'm not going to do this question justice, I guess. But you mentioned very briefly work intensification and demands. Why is everyone so flipping busy, and how do we change it in 90 seconds?
I think there's lots of reasons for work intensification. I think that the always-on culture is one.
Yeah.
I think speed of technology means that our speed of response has increased. I think the pandemic's another reason, because we, for the first time, worked remotely. We stopped all our serendipitous gaps between things when we were walking to and from, and we never put them back in.
Back-to-back teams meetings.
Yeah. And so we didn't develop those rules in normal time.
Yeah.
What we can do about it, again, I think we've just done a big research project and published it actually a couple of months ago on what organisations can do about demands, because it's one of those things, always the elephant in the room, about organisations say, come and sort out wellbeing, but we can't address workload. We can't do that.
Yeah. Oh, the irony of running a session on wellbeing and half the people don't turn up because they're too busy and they don't have the time.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah. Yeah. And or so often we hear people not being able to access resources because they don't have the time to actually look on the website and it's not obvious, and that's enough. Then they're gone. What we found from this research is that, firstly, there's not a lot of research on it, so actually the answer's quite difficult there. But what works is taking a very local approach. So the reason for job demands is going to be different in different organisations, but also within organisations. So your team, your department. And the solution to that is something that you need to work out together as a team. And it's usually very small things. So in this research we worked with 4 organisations, really different organisations, from an ambulance trust to an NHS trust to a central government department to a big energy company, all who had problems with work demands, to get them in a collaborative way to say, okay, what can you do in your team that you can do, and these little small changes that they had significant effects 3 months later on well-being, on work demands, and they're things like, Instead of all the briefings happening daily when they come in, they collect all the briefings into one thing, and it's recorded, and it has transcribed next to it so that they can watch it there and then. It was developing a set of guidelines that they follow in terms of how they communicate with people, how they do CCs in. And lots of other examples like that. It's not massive things we need to do. It's little things that will make a big difference.
You say they're not massive things, and in a sense they're not, but the technology, we were never taught to use it properly. It was just thrown upon us, you know? And there's a huge, the difference, you know? My dad is recently retired, but he worked for 40 years in engineering, and, you know, I've talked to him about this, and he tells me stories early in his career where they would write a memo and send it to someone, and then you get a response 2 days later, you know, whereas nowadays it's Teams, messaging, it's just on. But we were never taught how to deal with this new technology. We still haven't been taught how to do it. We just had to get on with it. And, you know, part of it's going to have real benefits, being able to communicate really quickly and effectively and all the rest of it. But then there's going to be downsides to it as well. We need to work that through rather than just hoping people can deal with it.
Yeah, and putting back in those protocols around breaks. Breaks is one of the things that seems to be ubiquitous, that not just taking breaks, but doing breaks properly. So when we thinking about our content of our breaks, not just the length and duration of breaks as well.
You're going to say me watching 20 YouTube Shorts videos in my break isn't a real break. It's not, is it?
No. Probably not. No. Breaks is another podcast. I could talk all day about breaks to you.
Well, we'll have to do it. That's been amazing. The amount of content that you packed into half an hour just there. I really enjoyed having the conversation.
I loved it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time. And where can people find you if you want them to find you?
Oh, I wish I could remember the stand number. It's over almost by the entrance.
Perfect. And outside of the conference?
Affinity Health at Work.
Yeah.
Go to our website.
Okay.
Or message me.
Perfect. Right then. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Pleasure, Matt.
The rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.